Scottish band Marmalade were founded back in 1961, which was the year I was born. 5 years later, they became the Marmalade, and the rest, as they say, is history. Well, today in 2009, the band are still very much in demand, particularly for gigs in Europe. But on a flying visit to the Minto Hotel in Edinburgh for a private function, I caught up with two of the members of the band, original member Graham Knight and current lead vocalist Sandy Newman.
Look me up, look me down. Rainbow, you were fun to have around. I was dreaming of a love I had to share. Never thinking you were here, you are there.
It wasn't as if it happened overnight. It was because we did an awful lot before we actually had any major success. I mean, we'd played everywhere, we'd supported all the big bands, been on tours, travelled to Germany, the usual. And when it came, it was almost expected, because it was just waiting for the right record to come along, if you know what I mean.
And what was the first big breakthrough?
The first one was, we released a song called I See the Rain, and it was a success in Holland and Belgium and run about there. Didn't do a thing in Britain, which was a shame, because it was a good record. Then after that we recorded a song called Everlasting Love, and our manager had just signed a little band called The Love Affair at the time. So he decided that would be a good first record for them.
And they got to number one.
They got to number one.
But interestingly enough, continuing that theme, the same guy and the same producer actually gave you Lovin Things, which was almost identical to
Smith.
Everlasting Love.
Yeah, it was Mike Smith, from CBS. He discovered this one by the grassroots and suggested it. Well, he says, you didn't suggest in these days, you just did as you were told. This is your new song you're going to record, so we recorded it, and it was successful, and that was it.
It was one of those things, I suppose, where at that time, late 60s, if you got a successful song and formula, all you did was simply rejig the chords a bit, give it new lyrics, and release it.
That's
and it
right.
would be a hit.
Yeah, you're quite right. Yeah, well, the second one we had, Wait for Me, Mary Ann. It was the same thing with the big orchestra in the back and all the vocals, and just about that one didn't do too well. It entered the charts, but it wasn't as big as Lovin Things.
Back to the beginning a wee bit, because you were originally, of course, Dean Ford and the Gaylords in 1961.
Yes.
Nowadays, you wouldn't even dream of using that name.
We would have a massive following. Dean Ford and the Gaylords was a bit like Cliff in the Shadows and such and such and the such and such, And when all these new bands came out, Beatles and Blue Jeans and Tremolos and things, our manager decided that we should change the name. So we were playing one night in a place called Corsham down in Wiltshire, and he arrived and they came in, lads, I've decided the new name for the band. And we says, oh, what's that? He says, The Marmalade. And we sort of looked at him, he says, it was staring me in the face as I was having my breakfast. Said the Gollywog and Marmalade. And that's how the whole thing's happened.
You had a very good lineup, because you had fantastic folks like Junior Campbell, who went on to have solo success after he left the band. And you went through quite a few personnel changes.
One or two. Yeah, they seem to come and go. Who did we have? Hugh Nicholson, he joined after Junior left, and we had quite a lot of success with Hugh. And then he got fed up with it. And the funny thing is, actually, that some guitarists came to audition for us, and Sandy was one of them. But Dean, for some reason or other, wanted to be in control of the songwriting, and Sandy had was a songwriter as well as the musician and the vocalist, and he chose another guitarist from Wales, a small, young, wild, heavy guitarist. He wanted to change the image of the Marmalade. He wouldn't play the records. He wasn't singing Obladine. He wouldn't do Lovin Things. The only one he would sing was Reflections of My Life, because he co-wrote it. He wanted to become heavy. It really was down to Dean. He had this image for the band, this vision, and it didn't work because you couldn't go from being a pop group to being a heavy band, even though the Marmalade had been very heavy before, but not in a heavy band with a heavy sound, you know.
There was a story, Graham, that you were actually sacked from the band, but I suspect the real story was that actually the band just wanted to move in a different direction from what you're saying.
They wanted to move in a different direction, and the band split up. Basically, that's what it was. I mean, they got another bass player, Joe Breen. I think he played about 2 gigs with them or something like that, and then they just didn't do anything else, and they broke up. Came back up to Scotland, and Dean went to live in America later on, and that was the end of that section of the Marmalade. And the way it is just now, Alan Whitehead, the original drummer, he came back. There was myself, there was Sandy, and there was another singer called Ricky Peebles.
Didn't he? His name rings a bell. Didn't he sing only? Was it Only the Light? I think. Was he not? Was it? Eurovision entry? I think. Yeah.
And his manager was Alan Whitehead.
Really?
Funny that.
Do you still have contact at all with Junior Campbell? He stays in England, doesn't he?
Yeah, he lives down in West Sussex. Yeah, we see Junior now and again.
Of course, he went on to be a very successful producer, producing people like Barbara Dixon.
Yeah, he did some stuff for Barbara, but he made all his money with Thomas the Tank Engine.
Yeah, he wrote the music for Thomas the Tank Engine.
Yeah, simple as that, you know. How to become a millionaire? Write a children's theme tune.
Let's speak to Sandy now, because Sandy, you came into the group in 1972.
It was actually 73, November 73. Very cold in Finch Hampstead in Alan Whitehead's house. Yeah.
And I mean, here we are, dare I say, 36 years later in 2009.
That's right.
You mustn't really have thought that it was going to last that long, because for most musicians, quite often a band is quite a short-lived thing.
Well, I think when you were at the age I was at when you make the move, it was a bit like you asked Graham about that early thing about coming up from Deanford and the Gaylords. What was it like? You never thought that way. You never really completely planned things. There was the whole point of doing what you were doing, the natural climb of it. You know, I've got another 25 quid at that gig, you know. There was all that kind of thing. Building the circuit, and as Graham said, you get the record deal and it just moves on. But when I joined that whole thing, it was a bit strange. It really was very strange, because you still had Dean out there with Joe Breen doing the thing, and a lot of people from my sort of quarter were saying, "What are you doing this for? This is a mess." And I said, "Well, I don't think it is a mess. I think we can make this work." So that was really the way. That was the head when I came in. But I was 23. So.
But you came into a band who had a very big back catalogue, lots of hits.
That's right.
Internationally.
Yeah.
At 23, was it quite a shock to the system?
Not at all, because I was well versed in it. In fact, from the age of about 18 to 20, I had more hero worship than I've ever had. When I was the young blood with the long hair in the Chris McClure section. So none of it was a phase out thing. Because even in these days, we used to play, with Chris McClure, we'd play at the Bobby Jones Ballroom, and they'd literally have to put up crash barriers. And I hated all that at the time. It's like, oh, I thought I was being cool. But you know, none of the scale. You mean the scale of it, really? Not at all. No.
You know, for a few years after you joined, the band didn't have any hits. But then in '76, when you'd signed to Target Records, lo and behold, came along this Tony Macaulay song, "Falling Apart at the Seams," and it is you know, I was listening to it in the car as I drove here today, and it's still a fabulous little 3-minute pop song. But then Tony Macaulay could write those, couldn't he?
He could, but again, someone robbed Tony Burrows of a successful hit song. Tony did the demo, and Tony Burrows. Tony Burrows did the demo for that, because Tony did all the stuff for Tony Macaulay, Roger Greenaway. He was on everything. He was
on Top of the Pops 3 times in one night, wasn't he? Famously.
Absolutely correct. Well, Falling Apart at the Seams was going to be a Tony Burrows single as Tony Burrows, and I'm only assuming that somewhere in Macaulay's head, I don't think it was sitting well for him, and he was looking to do the high voiced thing, and he came into Peter Walsh's office, who was a manager, again the manager, and said, "Peter, have you got anybody that could do this?" And the buzzer went. I was upstairs and, "Sandy, come down a minute." So you did as you were told.
Yeah, he did it, yeah, schoolmaster.
And went into the office and said, "Tony's got this song," and he played the song, Tony Burrows' demo. And he said, he wants to talk to you about it. And we went upstairs to the accountant's office. The colleague got his beat up old guitar out and said, "Do you think you could sing it up here?" And I said, "Could you sing this in falsetto?" So we did it, tried it. The answer was yes. Gave us the demo. We went over to RAF Rhindalen and sat around a piano and arranged the vocals. Came back the next week and recorded it. And that's how quick something can change, you know. Because there was nothing months before it, you know.
And it is, you know, again, it's an amazing vocal range, and I have to compliment you on that, because, you know, getting those falsetto notes, it goes from quite low down to really high up. Did that must have stretched your vocal ability?
In a studio it did, because you do things live. There's a huge amount of getting away with things live when you're actually in a studio in the cold light of day, sometimes not at the time of day when you like to sing or want to sing. That's when it stretches. But we did a lot of work with Tony after that.
Graham, I want to ask you about you know, a song like Reflections of My Life. It is one of my all-time favourites, and I think so many people really can associate with the lyrics. And actually, we were chatting beforehand, and you and I both come from Springburn in Glasgow, actually. And so we've got that connection. But Reflections of My Life just seems to touch. It touches a nerve with so many people, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does. It's I don't know what it was. I mean, I can't explain it. Junior came into the studio one day and he says, I wrote this song last night. I just played Reflections of My Life. He says I had the idea as I was driving home, and he put it on his little Philips cassette that we used to have in the cars in these days, you know, and played Reflections. So we just went in and recorded it. Just naturally ran through and his ideas of how it should go. Dean wrote a couple of lines in it, and it just went on to become so massive. You know, it was a sleeper because it was out for a long time before it actually entered the charts. But once it entered the charts, it just went worldwide.
But actually, I think it's fair to say that Reflections of My Life was a very different style of song at that point from what Marmalade had actually been playing.
Yeah, well, what had happened was, see, we'd been with CBS Records, and the contract finished, and Peter Walsh, our manager, got assigned to Decca, and we were given basically free studio time to do whatever we wanted. And I mean, we used to have to go around to music publishers asking for songs, you know, because we didn't write songs at the time. And I think, June, you get the inspiration with the fact that you weren't running to a 3-4 hour schedule to get 3 songs done as you used to have to do in the likes of CBS when you had your record producer, you know, Mike Smith, and it was all done very quickly. You know,
but you know, the funny thing about the song, I think, is that 40 years later, it's probably even more relevant because people move much further away from home nowadays for work.
Yeah.
And so when they come back home and they see what their life was like, I think that means that they can actually associate with the lyrics far more.
Of course they can. I mean, the lyrics are
Esoteric.
Esoteric, that's a good
It's
word.
a big word, that. Everyone can relate to it. You can relate to the way the world is today, simply with the words of the song, you know. Well, it is a bad place, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a terrible place to live.
Graham Knight, Sandy Newman, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much for having us.